Greetings, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to do a review of the South Downs Way, which is a walk I've just completed. For those of you who don't know, the South Downs Way is a 100-mile national trail between the cities of Winchester and Eastbourne. Traditionally it's walked from west to east. The reason for this is that you finish with the spectacular cliffs around Beachy Head before you walk down into Eastbourne, but obviously there's nothing to stop you from walking the other way if you wish. Yeah, that's the way the route I went. I actually did it in two legs because I started it in the end of June, the very last few days of June this year, and ended up with a heat wave, and I just really started to struggle with heat exhaustion, dehydration, etc. So I did it in two sets, first between Winchester and Amberley, and then secondly later on between Amberley and Eastbourne. Yeah, a little bit about the actual trail itself. It's pretty tough actually. My total, let's go through a few of the statistics. Where are we? I think my total elevation I climbed was just shy of 12,000 feet, which is 3,600 and odd metres. Yeah, I mean there was one or two very stiff climbs, but the vast majority of that, I suppose, was more gradual climbing rather than very steep climbs. But the tough part of it really is an awful lot of the path is on flinty chalk, which is very, very hard wearing on the feet. Really, the end of every day my feet were really, really aching and tired. That's partly due to the fact that I had quite a heavy pack on, but undoubtedly the flint made a massive difference to how your feet feel, so you do need to be aware of that. Well, let's go through. Generally speaking, whenever I do one of these reviews, people ask me, well, what was your best bit? I think for me, the best bit was probably from sort of Washington area through to Ditchling Beacon. Great views from there across the up to the north, across what's called the Low Weald. Yeah, pretty spectacular. You could see for miles and miles. It was relatively easy walking, quite a bit of grass to walk on, and also, I mean, there was one or two stiff climbs, but generally speaking, you were on a plateau quite a lot of the time. So yeah, relatively easy walking for most of that stretch. Equally, people asked if that was the best, what was the worst. I think for me, the bit between sort of Queen Elizabeth Country Park and South Harting Down, that was mostly because obviously in the country park you were in the woods, and even after actually when you left the woods, where you thought you might get some views, actually it was very high hedges or vegetation, so you couldn't see anything. It was very gravelly track, and so it was uncomfortable under the feet, and yeah, it was just pretty uninspiring, shall I say. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, and some people probably would enjoy it, but for me, not the best bit, definitely. What sort of facilities are there along the route? Pretty good, actually, considering, I mean, it's called the South Downs Way. Now, people may wonder, why is it called Downs when it's actually ups that you're on? Well, Downs comes from the old word of dun, which meant hill. So, but yeah, the South Downs are a chalk escarpment, basically, chalk hills. They're not mountains, but they're hills called downland. So the very nature of the fact that is that there's very few areas of habitation, villages or towns, on the actual route, unless there's one or two occasions where the route does drop down off the downs into a village. But yeah, most of the time it's up away from from where anybody lives. So you do perhaps sort of need to think about what food you're going to carry or where you're going to get stuff. However, as I say, along the way there are a few pit stops. There's I think it's the Holden, well, I'll go through from, say, Winchester end towards Eastbourne. Initially you've got Holden Farm. That's a brilliant place. There's a campsite there as well, but usually for most people, certainly going west to east, that's far too soon in the day because it's only probably about 6 miles into the walk. But yeah, there's a great cafe there, good pit stop. Another couple of miles on from that, there is actually a pub right on the side. So if you're anything like me, you can't pass a pub without going in. So yeah, the Millbury at Millbarrow, and then probably another, I don't know, 5-6 miles beyond there is Exton, where there's a pub, the Shoe Inn. Once again, I think that's a slight diversion from the route of the path, but literally only a couple of 100 yards. Yeah, the next place was Meon Springs Cafe, quite a nice little cafe beside the river or the springs, and they even had a campsite there as well. Next place would be the Sustainability Centre, where once again there's a campsite and a vegetarian cafe. I didn't go there, but yeah, I've read accounts, and by all accounts it's quite good. After that you've got a cafe at the Queen Elizabeth Country Park. I had some breakfast there, which was very nice. Yeah, so can recommend that. The next place is the Cadence Cafe at Cocking. The Cadence Cafes, there's two of them on the South Downs Way. The Cadence Club is more of a aim for cyclists, run by cyclists. I think it's only open at the weekend, and so both the ones I passed, they weren't actually open. But yeah, if you time it right, you may be able to get something to eat at those, because there's, say, one at Cocking and then there's another one at Littleton Farm. In Amberley Station, because you've got Amberley Village and a place called Amberley Station, where obviously the railway station is, but it's actually a sort of mini village in its own way. And there's a riverside cafe which I used, and also a pub which had a quick pint in whilst I was waiting for the train. Yeah, the cafe is very good, very busy because it's right beside the river, so as in the name. At Washington, I came across a burger van, TJ's Burgers. It was actually a welcome break because there was some, they got some picnic tables to sit at. It was a burger. It was nothing to write home about, but it filled me with calories, so it did a job. The next bit is Truly Hill Youth Hostel, where I stay. They've got a campsite and a decent cafe that's open pretty early in the morning through till relatively late in the evening. So yeah, very good facilities there. The next place would be the Devil's Dyke pub, right on top of the Devil's Dyke. That was shut when I got there, but yeah, I don't know. Well, they must do food, so yeah, I would imagine that's a handy place to stop. I then came across Saddlescombe Farm Cafe. That was lovely, actually, Saddlescombe Farm. Just tiny little courtyard, but they had a covered seating area because it was raining when I was there, and they just basic coffee and cake, and I think they might have made the odd hot sandwich sort of thing, but yeah, nothing too special. What was after that? Pycombe, there was a pub which I did use. Once again, that's beside the is it the A24? But so it's got the potential to get very busy. Wasn't too bad, and I was there on a Saturday lunchtime. But yeah, quite handy. Or indeed, there is a BP petrol station there. I think which sells. I think it might even be Marks and Spencer's food. So that's handy. It's slightly off route, but only a few hundred yards. The next place would be Southease. Sorry, no, telling lies. Pink Pit Stop, sorry, at Street Hill Farm. This is a little sort of horse box wagon that opens up. I think they're only open at the weekend between something like 10 and 4. But yeah, I stumbled across it, and yeah, it was very welcome. They had picnic tables once again to be able to sit down to, and a nice cup of tea I think I had. Yeah, that was most welcome. Housedene Farm, where I camped, they've got a very small shop, sells a few provisions, but that's probably the only. Well, there is a garage a few hundred yards up the main dual carriageway A27, but you wouldn't particularly want to walk alongside that, but and that would be off route. But Housedene Farm's right on the side of the trail, so yeah, you can grab a few provisions from there. Next was Southease Youth Hostel. Great cafe there. Once again, I think it's open quite long hours. So yeah, very handy to stop at if you're not staying there. Stop at to grab something to eat, because then there is a long stretch where there isn't anything, because after that there's nothing until you get to Alfriston. But Alfriston, I think there's certainly 3, if not 4 pubs, plus a cafe, plus a posh hotel, and a small shop as well. So yeah, lots of facilities in Alfriston. So that's definitely a place you want to be stopping at to resupply and get food, etc. After that, Exeat, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, EXCEAT. Just before you enter the Seven Sisters Country Park, I found a nice cafe in a farm there, and yeah, once again, had a nice big cooked breakfast. That really did fill me up, actually. I couldn't eat it all, but yeah, it was very nice. At Burling Gap, there is a cafe there, albeit when I went through, that was on a Monday at lunchtime. Well, yeah, it was around about lunchtime, and it was closed, even though the sign said it was open on a Monday. But it was blowing an absolute gale, so whether it was closed because they didn't expect any people there or not, I don't know. But finally, right on top of Beachy Head, there's a pub where you could get food. Great big barn of a place, so yeah, loads of food options there. And then yeah, then obviously you got the finishing line at Eastbourne. Campsite wise, as I said, I camped in campsites all the way through. First one was at Meonside camping near East Meon, so slightly off route. I chose to go there purely because it meant that I could go then to the pub in East Meon to get a meal in the evening. Lots of people, rather than take that divert, go through to the sustainability centre. The only trouble with that is that you need to get there early enough before their cafe shuts, because there's no evening food as such. But so that's why I chose to go to Meonside. It's a pop-up campsite. That was, I think it's only open summer months. There is a other campsite there, but when I phoned them up, they were full. So that was a Friday evening, but yeah, so they wouldn't take me. But I think that's slightly more permanent setup. The other next campsite I stayed at was Manor Farm near Cocking. Fairly basic setup, just sort of portaloos and a tap in a field, but once again, there's, well, what was it, about 3/4 mile walk down into Cocking, and there's a pub there to get food, which is what I did. Obviously my third night I didn't actually stay because I quit and caught a train home. I was planning on staying in Washington, but obviously didn't. So there's a bit of a gap then, because obviously when I restarted again in Amberley, I then walked all the way through to Trueley Hill Youth Hostel. But the camping field there, it's right on a slope. It's annoying actually, because they got a nice bit of flat grass, which they've reserved for having fire pits and stuff like that. But I often wonder, people who open these campsites on the side of Blinking Hills, if they ever actually try sleeping in a tent, because it's nigh on impossible if you're on the side of a hill. You just keep rolling off your mattress and into the side of the tent, and you're constantly waking up. So yeah, so I can thoroughly recommend the youth hostel, and perhaps I should have stayed inside, but I can't recommend the camping field there. Housedene Farm, I camped that on the 5th night. That's once again not completely flat, but it was a nice relaxed atmosphere there. I suspect, height of summer, that could be quite a busy place, but it is quite near to the A27, so you will get traffic noise, but I put some earplugs in, and to be honest, I never really noticed it at all. And yeah, good decent shower and toilet facilities there. And the final place I stayed was Alfriston Camping Field, or whatever it's called. That is, once again, it's not the flattest field in the world, and it's got reasonable facilities, albeit they're a bit sort of separated. You've got toilets one side of a field and then showers at another end, but still perfectly acceptable. And then you've got half-mile walk back into the village as such, so where you've got all the places I described earlier to be able to eat and stuff. So I can recommend staying there. It's very handy. So can I actually recommend the trail? Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's one or two boring bits, but on the whole, yeah, you've got some wonderful views. The only sad part of it, and I totally understand, it is called the South Downs Way, but the South Downs National Park encompasses lots and lots of the villages, which unfortunately you don't visit because you're up on the downs, unless of course you're staying in accommodation where you have to drop down every day to go to your accommodation. Therefore you'll probably sample some of the villages, but if you're a camper like me, yeah, you don't really get to see most of the South Down villages, which is slightly sad, because there are some gorgeous villages around there. But it is, you're walking along the ridge, so that's what it's named after, the South Downs. So I totally understand the way they've routed the actual trail. It's brilliantly signposted. That there was, I can't think of hardly anywhere where you had to use a map. It was, yeah, every twist and turn there was signposts. So yeah, navigation's not going to be an issue whatsoever. Would I recommend it to anybody else? Yeah, definitely. It's not a walk in the park. It is tough, especially under feet conditions, but it's definitely doable. If you're not carrying a heavy pack and perhaps you're staying in accommodation, then I would imagine it's a lovely gentle walk, really. I mean, yes, there's going to be some climbing, and probably more so if you do stay in accommodation, because you're going to have to keep dropping down off the plateau. But so you're probably going to do twice as much climbing, or 3 times as much climbing as what I did. But even so, it's not that difficult. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. Hopefully you wouldn't have it as hot as I did, but some people probably be able to walk in those conditions, but they were just too hot for me. But anyway, yeah. And the only thing I would say about the path is that for quite a lot of stretches of it, you are sharing it with cyclists, and yeah, it's far more popular with cyclists than it seemed to be with walkers. So you'll probably encounter 10 times as many cyclists as you will walkers, and obviously some of them go at a feral rate of knots, and they can sneak up on you from behind. So you need to sort of have your wits about you. Personally, I think it ought to be compulsory that cyclists have to have a bell or some horn or some warning instrument on their push bikes, because yeah, there was 2 or 3 occasions where I very nearly got taken out, or I nearly took them out, because I was totally unaware they were coming up behind me. Especially, you know, I had quite windy conditions at times, and with that wind blowing through your ears, you just cannot hear the cyclist coming up behind you. So yeah, you do need to be aware of that. They're perfectly entitled to be there, so you know, I'm not complaining about them whatsoever, but I'm just saying as a walker, they are a hazard that you need to be aware of. Anyway, I hope you found this useful, informative. If there's anything else you think I can help with, then obviously leave a comment and I'll see if I can answer your questions for you. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.